Griffin the Gecko, back at it again. Now, if you know me, especially in my personal life, you know I love two things: rock climbing and books. And on this channel, I figured why not combine those passions? It is my channel, after all. So, welcome to Griffin from the Ground, where we unpack essays on topics I'm itching to explore. Consider this your intellectual belay as we climb into some tricky subjects. Okay, so, as an English major, I tend to write a lot. You know, stuff that's conventional, stuff that's just for class, stuff that's for me, stuff that's controversial, stuff that just interests me. And instead of letting these essays collect dust, I thought I'd put them out there and see what you all think. I'm not going to straight up read just the essay from top to bottom, because I tried that, and it was 11 minutes of jargon, and it was boring, I was quiet, and I didn't like it. It was great as an article, but I didn't like it. I didn't like hearing my own voice reading it out loud. I thought it sucked. So, I'm just gonna look at the article that I wrote, and I'm gonna ramble along with it. Alright? So, today's climb, we're tackling something that's been bugging me since high school. Book banning. Yeah, that's right. The act of saying, I don't like this book, so now no one gets to read it. It's censorship. It's a decision often made by a really loud minority to shut down access to different viewpoints. I really began exploring banned books in high school when my AP Lang and Comm teacher, Mr. Schnee, would go on caffeinated tangents at 9 in the morning to get us all pumped and inspired. His influence made me start not only reading these books, but collecting them to save them for my own classroom someday, assuming, we won't have any more book fires. But, that's a conversation for another episode if you want to get political. Books are banned for all sorts of reasons. We got sexuality, violence, religion, racism, you name it. Basically anything that rocks the boat a little bit too much. So let's unpack it. Banned books. The phrase itself conjures up images of secret meetings, whispered recommendations, and the rebellious thrill of reading something forbidden. It's like the back of the library where your elementary students aren't supposed to go, but they sneak on back there anyway. Kind of like the back of Spencer's. Anyways, it's dramatic, right? But beyond the mystery, the issue raises some seriously vital questions about freedom of expression and how curious we're allowed to be about the world and the role that stories play in shaping society. Now, I get it. A lot of the reasons for banning books come from a place of good intentions. Parents want to protect their kids, uphold values, and that's totally fine. But the kicker is that limiting access to literature can have some pretty detrimental consequences. Right now, across the United States, there is a massive debate happening about what books are appropriate for young readers and what aren't. There's been a huge surge in challenges in outright bans in schools and libraries, and it sparked a real controversy. People are worried about intellectual freedom, censorship, and how we're educating the next generation in a country that's supposed to be all about diversity, land of the free, right? So what's driving this trend? Why are certain books suddenly the public enemy number one? The argument in favor of banning a book usually boils down to, quote, protecting the children from mature or disturbing content. And I get it. Parents want to shield their kids from harm. The fear that a book might corrupt or negatively influence a young mind is completely understandable. But here's the thing, banning a book doesn't erase the issues it talks about. It just stops young people from exploring these ideas in a safe and informed way, with guidance from teachers, librarians, and parents. Plus, banning books because they offend certain religious or cultural groups, this sets a really dangerous precedent. Whose values get to be protected, and how do we determine that? How do we balance free expression with the right to not be offended? I'm telling you, these are big questions and there aren't easy answers. But banning a book just because someone finds it subjectively offensive ultimately silences marginalized voices and limits the perspectives that get shared with the public. Alright, climbers, time for the crux of this conversation. We talked about book banning being like trying to chop off the climbing rope halfway up a route. Haha, climbing puns, gotta work those in somewhere. But why are folks so eager to swing that axe in the first place? What kind of rocks are they trying to dislodge from the cliff face? So, let's get into it. According to the American Library Association, or the ALA, things are getting extra wild lately. We saw a record-breaking number of book challenges in 2022, like doubling the year before. That's a whole lot of no being thrown around libraries, schools, and even universities. We're talking about, I want to say it was over 2,500 unique titles under fire. It's like a flash flood on a Sunday afternoon. Now, what kind of books are these book banning boulder singers targeting? Well, let me tell you, there's a few trends. I have 3 that I've listed in this article. Seems like books dealing with number 1, LGBTQ+ themes, Yeah, anything with rainbow flags raising, or stories about folks exploring their gender identity, or even just showing same-sex relationships often lands in the crosshairs. The classic grumble is that these are inappropriate for the youngins, that they're pushing some kind of agenda or messing with their religious beliefs. We're talking about books like Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe, which is about discovering that they are non-binary and asexual, important stuff, especially for them, and All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, where he talks about being black and queer growing up. They both got caught in crossfire because they touch on gender, race, and sometimes, yeah, things get a little explicit. Next up on the chopping block, we have books that tackle racism, racial injustice, or just feature folks of color. The argument here gets a little muddy, with some saying these books push critical race theory, which, let's be real, isn't exactly required reading in middle school, or that they make white kids feel uncomfortable. We're talking heavy hitters like Toni Morrison, pretty much all of Toni Morrison's works, really, but the example I gave here was Beloved, which is a ghost story about slavery. I absolutely recommend all of Toni Morrison's stuff, by the way. 10 out of 10. One of my favorite authors. Anyway, also, Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give, which is about a teenager witnessing a police shooting, and Ibram X. Kendi's Stamped Racism, Antiracism, and You, which is about breaking down different types of racism. These books are supposed to make us think about the world around us. That's the point. And of course, anything with a hint of allusion to sex, even if it's important to the story, gets often labeled as, you guessed it, pornographic. Sexuality and explicit content here, and it's deemed harmful to kids. Even the great Toni Morrison again got hit by this with The Bluest Eye being banned for these reasons. It faces topics such as racism, incest, child molestation, stuff like that, hard stuff. In this book, sex is associated with violence. Real talk. And by the way, I'm not advocating for parents to hand their 8-year-old a nice hardcover copy of 50 Shades of Grey. By the way, I feel like that just needed to be said. Now here's the thing, climbers. This is not a new route we're going up, okay? Book banning is like that Chip Hold everybody knows about. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird. These literary titans have been challenged and banned throughout history. Why? Because they make people uncomfortable. They force them to think, to question, and confront the world around them. And again, that's the point. These books, even the ones with themes that might make you squirm, they're vital. They offer a glimpse into different experiences, they challenge our perspectives, and they force us to grapple with tough issues. By blocking access to them, we're not just erasing stories, we're erasing history and undermining our ability to learn from the past. And that, my friends, is a dangerous fall. From what I'm seeing, there's a few big boulders in the way. Alright, first off, the hell was that? Alright, my room's haunted. Anyways, you got these organized advocacy groups. Think of them as super focused climbing teams, but instead of scaling mountains, they're scaling school boards. And they suck at it. Well, they're actually really good at it, but that's why they suck. Groups like Moms for Liberty, I'm hearing, are pushing hard to get certain books out of schools. Targeted school board meetings, igniting social media, really making some waves. And then there's the whole political polarization thing. These bans aren't popping up randomly, folks. They're often clustered in politically conservative areas. Seems some folks think these challenges as part of a bigger tug of war over what values and stories get taught. Now here's where things get a little bit tricky and my toes get a little tingly. We've got the whole parental rights versus intellectual freedom debate. Some parents honestly believe they're protecting their little ones, and that's a valid point. But the counterpoint, and it's a big one, is that a ban for one is a ban for all, and it limits everyone else's access to a rainbow of ideas. It is a slippery slope. And no gecko wants to fall off a slippery slope. And, get this, new legislation in some states is actually making it easier to challenge books. Laws that push for more parental involvement sounds great on paper, but according to the EveryLibrary Institute in 2023, it can open doors for more banning. It also, unfortunately, means that some teachers and librarians start to self-censor. How are we supposed to learn if we're picking and choosing what material we read to our kids? I'm studying to be a middle school teacher. I have just enough control over what my students will read in the future that I can hopefully push them in the right direction. What am I going to do if I run out of options? Why all the fuss about banned books anyway, by the way? Well, they're kind of like a flashing light saying, hey, freedom of expression is precious, and it's always under threat. They push us to face uncomfortable truths. They challenge us to think for ourselves. And that's a good thing. Look, banning books deprives students of the chance to explore different cultures, experiences, and ideas. And when books with LGBTQ characters or people of color get disproportionately targeted, well, that sends a terrible message that those voices aren't valued. Instead of banning, we should be empowering readers, especially young ones, to think critically. Give them tools to break down texts and understand different perspectives and build their own informed opinions. And let's welcome open conversations about tough topics in a safe and supportive place. I'm not saying books are infallible, but they can be a great place to engage. Concerns about content? Valid. Banning? A threat to free society. So let's champion the freedom to read, to question, and to learn. Because when we do that, we're defending the freedom of thought itself. The debate over book bans is worth having. So, what do you all think? Am I missing something? What are your experiences with banned books? What's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more Griffin from the Ground. Next time, who knows, maybe we'll unpack the ethics of free solo climbing. I've made a list in the description of all of my sources and all of the books that I referenced going on this tangent. I will talk to you guys soon. Toodaloo! Peanut butter tortilla tube.